Always a pleasure to be joined by David Pagnotta from the fourth period. He's also one half of the CFO Rundown Insider Edition with Irf Ghaffar every Wednesday here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. Dave, let's start with what you and Irf started with on the most recent episode of the pod. Kiefer Sherwood. What's the update there? Is there any urgency in Vancouver to move on from this guy? Are you surprised we're still talking about this on December 4th?
A little bit, Ty, not to lie. I figured that once this really got out, it seemed like they wanted to make sure that they were going to make at least one big move relatively quickly in all of this. Now, it was also, the message was put out there to start getting the ball rolling as opposed to waiting until, January and then potentially making moves. But with so many teams interested, Vancouver is just kind of sitting there going, all right, well, who's going to give us the best return now? He's second in the league in hits. We know what he can do goal production-wise, although that's dipped a little bit, but I don't think anybody anticipated him continuing that actual pace throughout the season. And he's got that $1.5 million cap hit that I'm going to continue to harp on because it's so attractive to so many teams. So when you put all three of those things together, the secondary scoring ability, the physicality, the dollars, Vancouver is hoping to maximize a return on this. And yes, they're looking at young athletes. They want to bring in some young players, NHL-ready guys. But at the same time, if a team is willing to give a first-round pick as part of this, and again, it's going to be late in that first round, most likely by whichever team tries to acquire them, and maybe sprinkle a little extra on top of that, I think that's what the Canucks are hoping for, either that or equivalent value.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pieces that can move and what's going on. Again, it's still that feeling out process with teams, right? Like who's the first guy to go? Yep. Trying to get as much value as you can. And the team I want to jump to is the Buffalo Sabres. When I talk about UPL, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, right? He's obviously been at the forefront of trade talks and where he's at. He's 3-1 in his last four, right? He's above league average save percentage, which is crazy to say at .899. What happens in Buffalo? Like, is he a guy that gets moved out? I know there was that video that's circulating around him at a bar. Like, poor guy can't even go for a beer anymore.
I know, right? It's after a loss. Sometimes you need a 1 or 2 or 7 after one of those. Buffalo has, at least they feel they have, a pretty good bag of riches in net. And with Devin Levi coming up and with how Ellis and some of the other guys have performed this season, UPL, it looks like might be a little bit more expendable. Now you try to examine this a little bit more and you go, well, he's got a no trade clause that kicks in next season, July. Is there a possibility of something happening now? I think Buffalo's willing to listen. He's got a $4.75 million cap hit. I think the Sabres will listen. If they do make a move, I believe it would be to address other areas of the team, not necessarily getting a goalie back. I don't think they need that. They'd be looking at either somebody up front or on the back end, probably up front. But given the marketplace, it'd be interesting to. I don't anticipate something happening right now. I think this is more something that kind of gets. You're going through the exploratory phase and might be something more geared towards the offseason. But with some other teams that are looking to kind of potentially entertain the possibility of moving a netminder like St. Louis, maybe that's, an area that they look at. If they move somebody out, don't bring in a goalie back, go in this direction. There are a few different variables in play, but that type of creativity includes a lot of cap juggling and financial juggling, which leads me to believe that might be more summer. But I think if the right deal presented itself, I think Kevin Adams and Jarmo Kekalainen and the guys in Buffalo would consider moving UPL in season.
Yeah, I think anything can go there in Buffalo, right? I've been through it. It's been a long struggle, right? You see it go on. Yeah. I want to switch now to a team out west in the Seattle Kraken, right? This is a team that, was hanging around the playoffs. They've dropped their 4-4-2 in their last 10. They just don't really have that star player when we start talking about a league built on superstars. What's the plan for them moving forward here as we try to catch up, I guess, in the Pacific?
Yeah, well, they're mapping that out now. They're in LA this week, going through their scouting meetings and just trying to map out a plan exactly to what you said, to how this is going to look moving forward. They've got some good pieces, but you're right. They don't have that superstar presence. And obviously that's tough to get. But they're looking to continue, or still looking to see if they can add somebody in their top 6. They were in on Jordan Kyrou in the offseason. In and around the draft, like a number of other teams were. That's the caliber of player they'd like to bring in. Somebody in his mid-20s who's controllable. He's got some term on his contract, and they can get creative with potentially bringing him in. Now, that type of move typically is more in summer, but we're seeing, because of the salary cap, a lot of teams being more willing to make those types of moves in season because they've got more cap flexibility now and obviously going to have a lot more moving forward because the cap's going up. They also have some internal business they got to take care of with a bunch of free agents or eligible free agents going into the summer. But Seattle's trying to just figure out what they've got exactly and how they can and how and where they could potentially pounce in order to bring in, one of these younger big fish that might potentially be available. This might be a scenario where we see something out of left field, be it, them, Utah, another team that's also looking to add a big piece up front. Usually that takes a little bit of the exploratory process. You got to go out there and poke and see if there's an avenue to explore a certain player on another team. Hey, is this guy available? Would you listen? As soon as you hear that, maybe like a little bit of hesitancy, you're going to want to try to pounce and convince that team to make that type of move. So I think that's kind of where Seattle is at. And if it doesn't happen now, I think now being in season, I think that's something they're going to continue to explore. But that's a priority for them, is to bring in somebody that fits their top six, preferably on the first line, that can add some extra punch to that lineup.
I want to throw you a couple of questions from our YouTube chat here because they've been tossing them over. Yeah. Lori is in, and she wants to know, do the Red Wings have the prospects and salary cap to make a legit offer for Quinn Hughes?
I think they have the pieces. I know everything's getting hyped up with Detroit and everything. Merrick was the first one to throw that out last week about Detroit being a team that to keep an eye on, and I think that's the case. But with Quinn Hughes, I still maintain that I'd be surprised if anything happens this season. That being said, I think Detroit has the pieces to make something work. It just depends on what if Vancouver's willing to take a significant package that doesn't necessarily lead to a proven young star in the NHL right now, but a guy or a couple pieces that have tasted the NHL that are ready to make that jump. I think that's something that Vancouver would entertain, but you're probably looking at, if you're going in that direction, 3 to 4 significant pieces in a package in order to pry Quinn Hughes out of there. I think that's a possibility in terms of Detroit having the assets, but I still think it's premature in terms of Vancouver's willingness to even entertain that thought with any team.
We had another one too, and I know the Flyers are a team that's popped up a little bit in the Quinn Hughes thing, but Jay is in, and I think he is a Flyers fan, but he wanted to know, have you heard anything about the Canucks having interest in someone like an Owen Tippett? So I guess you can start there, and he goes on to add, like, who could the Flyers net from the Canucks for him? I mean, that's a whole different conversation to play hypothetical games, but Owen Tippett, is that a guy who's legit on the market?
On the market, no. But on the radars of a lot of teams, yes. And still, yes. I bring this back to the start of the season when I first mentioned that he was a guy that a lot of teams are interested in pursuing at some point if the Flyers are in a position to make that move. I talked to some people in management at the time in Philly, and they're like, whoa, we're not shopping him. And that's still the case. But it does seem like there are teams that are looking at the Flyers and going, all right, let's see kind of how they piece together their lineup. And if the ice time isn't fully there for a guy like Owen Tippett, whose no trade kicks in July, maybe that's an avenue to pursue. And I think the Canucks are one of the teams that have some interest in Owen Tippett. I think there are a few others that have also poked around at various points in the off season and at the start to at least say, hey, if you get there, give us a call. But from Vancouver and Philly's perspective, there's obviously the Tocchet connection. There's familiarity there with some of his players, or former players, I should say. I don't know if there's a fit there, even on, like, yes, there would be interest in Quinn Hughes. I think every team would love to take a run at him. But right now, I'm not sure if the right fit is there for what Vancouver would be looking for Hughes and what the Flyers may be willing to part with in any type of deal. But between the two, again, yes, there's going to be a connection because of talk, and there are some players that I'm sure he'd like to bring over. But I don't think there's anything overly imminent, I guess is the best way to put it, between those two clubs.
You can hear more from him and Irf Gafar on the latest episode of the DFO Rundown Insider Edition. It's right here on the DFO YouTube. Dave, appreciate your time, and we'll chat with you again next week.
Can't wait, boys. See ya.
Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.